We've just got a question through from GJ in California. Morning, GJ, and welcome on board. And GJ is asking if these two are siblings that are simply practicing for a future dispute or a more important dispute in later life. And this could be the case, GJ, but I find it high on hippoing. But if these were just two siblings playing around, I'm sure there'd be other members of the raft of hippos in this dam, and it wouldn't be as intense as the fight we are experiencing. At any stage, GJ, this could turn from being relatively calm and in control to the complete opposites. But what would cause that, I'm not actually sure. So what would trigger that change in intensity and ferociousness of this fight? But I do understand where you're coming from. It doesn't seem too intense, but this is often how fights in the animal kingdom play out. It takes time and many different attempts between one another to establish who's dominance. And ideally, they'd be able to establish dominance without one individual causing huge damage to another. However, in a well-placed bout, when it's equal, either one will want to stand down, and therefore looks like a young oxpecker. Doesn't have its full adult plumage or coloration. Its beak isn't bright yellow. Oh, that was awesome. Its island just disappeared. No. So yeah, GJ, a good question, and it could potentially be the case, but I would assume that these are not siblings. They possibly grew up in different places, or even if they did grow up together, they've got to a point now where they have realized that there's not enough room for the two of them here. Oh, there we go. Dave on Twitter has just put through a very interesting fact for us regarding hippo ivory, and that is that George W. Bush had his dentures carved out of hippo ivory. Now, just a random fact, but an interesting one at that, considering we are seeing George Washington, was the individual who had his dentures made out of hippo teeth. And just an interesting fact that is relevant, considering we are watching a lot of hippo teeth this morning, a lot more than we usually see. And you can see some blood. I mean, nothing serious coming from the jaws of these animals, but that is understandable considering how they have been crashing into one another. guys have just got to establish who's in charge. One of you's got to accept that you're not good enough. But like I say, if it's a well-managed fight, just as it would be with humans, with no person willing to stand down, it could go on for a long time, and to kind of a point of no return potentially for either one of these individuals. But let's see what happens now that they are getting onto the shallower section, it appears. It is at times like this where one may turn the other and get it out the dam, but as we did see earlier, the individual that did prove dominant for a short period of time and turn the one and get it running out the dam shortly stopped its chase or charge and didn't continue to chase the individual away for good. More tail flapping, or dung flapping. It appears that it may have run out of dung, because that was just a tail flap with no dung being swished from side to side. That also that interesting mouth movement that they do, opening and closing their mouth. I don't know if that's simply to soothe the little cuts and sores from the fighting, or to entice the other individual in. What is going through their heads? Oh, well, the oxpeckers are back. They're coming in numbers now. There's 4 that have landed collectively, or all on the one individual. They're taking sides, it appears. I think they've simply chosen that one because he was more submerged out the water. Or less submerged in the water, more submerged out the water. A bigger island on which to beach themselves. Wow, look at that, folks. Look at this. This is serious now. This is serious. He's really got him coming towards us here now. And that was one of the most powerful displays certainly that we've seen exerted between these two. And is he going to continue the struggle out the water now? Will he continue to force it out the water? No, it looks like the other one's managed to regain some strength, and also I think because it has the bank of the dam in its favor. Wow. Now you saw how quickly the one individual managed to force the other one in one direction, and he really did have the upper hand, but it did turn at one point, and now the individual that was getting taught a lesson has evidently pulled back a few notches. But what we have is certainly seen as an increase in intensity. The problem is they do get tired, understandably, and now, even after that very intense battle, they need a small break now, it appears, to regain their breath and their strength. I'm just hoping they aren't going to run into us at any stage, but I'm mentally prepared to get this vehicle started and out of here as quickly as possible. It's always the same individual that is doing the tail flapping of dung, and that is the individual that did get chased out the water and doesn't have a notch in its ear. The one with the notch in its ear does appear to be the more dominant, I think, but I am losing focus of what's going on here as they do begin to fight. But I will be able to look back at the photographs and oh,
we have a victor. Maybe not.
Yeah, it's hard to tell because now I've noticed that it was the one without the notches in its ears that got the better of the one with the notch in its ear. So they are very evenly matched, these two. Because on one occasion, the individual with the notch in the ear managed to chase the other individual completely out of the water. And now in this case, the individual without the notches in the ear seemed to win that round fairly convincingly. Doris from Kentucky, good morning. Doris has just provided us with some interesting information on this hippo, and Doris has been watching WildEarth for years and remembers that there was a hippo at Gowrie Dam with a notch in its ear a few years back when they were last filming here, so it could well be that same individual. Thanks for that, Doris. I will definitely chat with Mark, as Mark was here back then and he may know more about this than myself. Well, he definitely will. So we will ask and maybe try and see in the archives if we can establish if it is the same individual. Because wouldn't that be nice to know that he has been dominant here for the last few years and now is potentially going to lose or regain control of this dam, but it does have competition. Dave Curry from Toronto. Good morning, Dave, and welcome on board here. Dave is asking how serious these fights can be with regards to injury, and the answer to that is very severe, fatal, not in all likelihood immediate death being caused by a fight, but there's a strong chance a loser will limp away with wounds that will, in a very short space of time, cause it to die. They can really cause huge lacerations, deep lacerations on one another's bodies, and these can then become infected and result in death. So they certainly can result in very, very fatal circumstances, these fights. But how this one is going to end, we're not too sure. It's not always that they do end in a fatal nature. And this one certainly doesn't look like it is at that level yet. They've hardly inflicted any damage onto one another, but that could change. That could very well change. And then another part of Dave's question was asking whether flood or drought causes more damage to various animals. And I think that question depends on the extent of the drought, the extent of the flood, and the exact animals that are being spoken about. I'm guessing you are talking about hippos, and floods can cause trouble for hippos. Too much water can wash baby hippos away. But I think drought in general would be more severe to hippos, because without any water they will not manage. Their skin won't cope in the heat of the day of the African sun. So they do need water, and therefore I think a drought would in all likelihood cause more damage to hippo population than a flood. But yeah, thank you for that question, Dave, and welcome on board. Let's see what happens with these two. And what injuries they do sustain over the next few hours as they battle it out. But this could go on for days, not just hours. But we will certainly, much as possible, film continue. Brian on. That's not to say that these events won't be captured or able for you to be viewed. Okay, what next? Keeping an eye behind us, making sure there's no rain creeping up on us, but it's still looking good for now. It's just so brutal that the way they fight. Oh, now they're getting out the water. This is going to be good, folks. This means we can see something very interesting here shortly. Let's watch what happens here. Wow, look at that. Listen to that power. Their teeth rubbing together. There you can see some blood on the two. Not much, but it is there. But this is now where they can really start causing damage to one another. When they're out the water and they've got full strength, you can see a lot of blood dripping down their chins now. But this is kind of what we were expecting, folks, for them to get out of the water. And that's when they can really cause damage to one another, but it seemed fairly even there. It did seem fairly well matched. So this is going to go on for a while until one of them tires and starts losing strength. But as we could all see there, very well matched, and still a long way for these two to go before they work out who's boss. Wow, This is incredible. Certainly the best hippo interaction I've ever seen, or hippo fights I've ever seen. So I hope you're enjoying it, folks, because I certainly am, and I haven't seen anything quite as dramatic as this regarding hippo fights. Shame they just are so tired now. Have you seen hippo fighting before, Brian?
This is my first time.
Well, we've hit the jackpot then. When they get into the depths now, things typically tend to calm down to a degree. However, after their last very intense bout, which was probably the most intense we've seen this morning, we may expect a slight change in their behavior and for them to potentially carry on without a break, which they've been taking every few minutes. More breaks than fighting is certainly how the morning has been spent. We've been here for close on 2 hours now, and of those 2 hours, I would say possibly 15 minutes of that has actually been accumulative fighting time. The rest of the time they are sizing one another up and regaining strength. But this does seem to be one of their longer rounds. I'm going to have a lot of photos to play with after this, but these sightings don't happen very often, so worth trying to capture as much of it as we can. What would be ideal is if they came out of the water quite close to us here, so that we could get some close-ups on their mouth, but that would be hair-raising for myself and Brian, and I probably in all likelihood would start moving the vehicle as they started getting any close to us. Yeah, it does appear that they are having a small break between rounds again. So you can expect a few more minutes of relative peace and calm. appears that this, no, just swimming around a bit. The one hippo kind of was heading straight towards us at one stage, so that did get my attention. I thought it was beginning to come and take out some of its anger on us. Pick an easier opponent, which we certainly would be. You wonder what those loud huffings and puffings mean to one another. So VM, if you could just go with the name please, that would be great again. Well folks, somebody from Canada, I think it's Liz from Canada, has...
Lynn with an N.
Oh, Lynn. Lynn with an N from Canada. Morning Lynn and welcome on board. Thanks very much for the research you've done, Lynn. Lynn has looked back into some old photographs of the hippo that used to live here at Gowrie Dam, and the individual that we can see here now is different to the individual that also had notches in his right ear, but according to Lynn the notches aren't exactly the same, and therefore we can assume that this is a new or different hippo. Not the one that was viewed at this dam a few years ago. So thanks very much for that information. See if we can get that heron hunting there in the background, Brian, while they're... So folks, it's all happening here at Vuyatela Dam. There's a grey heron hunting at the moment. So we'll stay on that for a few seconds, because if we're lucky we'll get to see it, and it looks like it might be about to strike at something. We might get a kill while these hippos regain strength for their next round. They dart that sharp beak of theirs into the water at incredible speed and either spear their prey or sometimes actually manage to catch it between the top and bottom bill. But it's certainly very focused on something. Here we go. Come on. Well, it definitely got something there. It was hard for us to see, but a small fish, another one. Well, it's picking on some small prey this morning, but we're getting a good idea of how quickly it can use that beak. I'm not sure whether it's tadpoles or small fish. It's always funny watching them when they do catch a big prey item, getting around the tricky deal of trying to swallow something whole through that thin little neck. can provide with some entertaining viewing. Okay, well, good to see a little bit of hunting this morning, albeit a grey heron for little fish that we can't even see. Like I say, the hippo do appear to be having a little bit of a break between fights. As soon as they do increase the intensity, which they tended to do every few minutes or so, every about 5 or 10 minutes they pick up the intensity again. Wow, what a beautiful morning, folks. We haven't moved very far from starting at around 6 o'clock. We headed out in the hope of getting to some birds' nests, but we hadn't been on drive for longer than a minute, I don't think, when we got the message from VM alerting us to what was going on here. So we've basically been here for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and we've moved once. At one stage the hippos did manage to, well, it's happened twice now, but initially there was one chase where one individual gained dominance over the other, and the one ran out the water, and we had to reposition to get a shot. So other than that, one move and then moving back to here, we haven't moved very far this morning, and it'll potentially be myself and Brian's second drive where we've almost spent 3 hours in one place or with one animal. And in this case it's with hippo. The last time we spent 3 hours in one place was, or with one animal, was with Quarantine, the male leopard. Either way though, it is a great opportunity to be able to spend this amount of time with animals and really get to understand their behavior and learn what you can from this unique interaction, because it doesn't happen every day. And like I say, folks, as soon as we start thinking, well, things are calming down a bit, they may be slowly tapering off things, and then all of a sudden they pick things up again and they're back at it. Earlier they were out of the water completely, and that's when we can expect to see the tables turn drastically, because it's when they are out the water that they are their most strong, their quickest. So if one does manage to get the upper hand on the other, it could then continue to create, I think, quite a lot of damage in a short space of time. But once they head together, head to head in the water, it's very difficult for them to change that position or get into a dominant position where they can damage and or chase off their opponents. So it's on those stages when they get out the water that we can expect to see some serious developments in this battle. But I think it is going to take quite a lot longer, and they're both to still be simply too evenly matched. But that could change, and it will change in a matter of time. It's just we're not sure how long it is going to take. But at the end of the day, one of these is going to be the victor and one of them will be the loser. So won't it be nice for us to find out who it is? A bit more huffing and puffing. This could mean the start of another round. Appears to be a, oh no, a little bit of movement, but no confrontation. The sun is poking through beautiful now in a tiny gap of the clouds. There's probably an eighth of blue sky out of the whole skyline that we can see. So the weather is up and down, and when the sun does come out briefly, the temperature does increase dramatically, which is surprisingly quite nice to be saying that it's nice to be warm here, because we usually do battle with the heat at this time of the year here. So the colder we are, the better. But this morning driving into work certainly was quite fresh. Good morning, Ellen. Ellen's just sent through an email asking whether there are different stages of fights between hippos and different levels of intensity. And Ellen, there certainly are. These two mean business. They're not playing around here. They're not practicing for another day. I think simply what's going on is that because they are very evenly matched at the moment, we're not being shown who is more dominant, but it will get to a point where one of them will gain strength or stamina over the other, and when it does do that, it will do its best to put in some serious attacks and try and injure its opponent as best as it can to ensure that it does gain victory over this dam. This is by no means, in my mind, a play fights or practicing for later years when they're grown up. These are two adult hippos that are simply very well matched, and due to their well matched nature of the fights, there's no evident winner at this stage, but they do in my mind appear to be at the initial stages of a fight, and I think as time goes by it will become more intense. But Ellen, it is a good question and good points. It's hard to tell how much more heated this fight will get. If they're both stubborn and they both don't want to leave, it could result in one being heavily damaged by the other before retreating. Or on the other hand, one could all of a sudden realize that he's picked on the wrong opponents, and it could run off into the bush. So it's hard to tell which way it's going to go. But at the moment we're in the middle of a very interesting situation, and it will be more interesting to follow closely as to what happens next. And that we shall do. But thanks very much for that question. Ellen is one of the regular viewers, so welcome on board, Ellen, and thanks for your question. What are you two going to do next?